Hello everyone and welcome to the Tradcast, the podcast that connects traditional archery enthusiasts. Today is episode number 6, and on today's show, I'm interviewing Jason Samkowiak of the Traditional Bow Hunting and Wilderness podcast, and we're going to be covering some important topics to traditional bow hunting. This is a show you're not going to want to miss. Let's jump right into it. Alright everyone, welcome to today's Tradcast, the podcast that connects traditional archery enthusiasts. Today is January 30th, and it's a very cold day here today in upstate New York. We got some snow falling, and old man winter is definitely upon us here in full force. But I got an awesome show in store for you today. I'm going to start out with just a few updates on a few things that I've been up to, and then I'm going to jump into a recent interview I did with Jason Samkowiak of the Traditional Bow Hunting and Wilderness podcast. And for any of you guys out there who are traditional archers and traditional shooters and bow hunters, if you haven't tuned into Jason's podcast yet, I tell you what, it's an absolute must listen. I've found his podcast to be very, very enjoyable. He covers pretty much every topic and every discussion you could ever hope to cover when it comes to traditional archery. He's got some great bow hunting tips. He's got some great outdoor wilderness survival tips. Just does a great job with this podcast. I enjoy listening to it, so I wanted to have him on the show to talk to him in a little bit further detail on a few topics that he covered in some of his podcasts that I found to be very informative. Things that certainly helped me already as I'm, making the switch here to traditional archery. So I just wanted to bring Jason on and cover some of those topics. We're going to get into that interview, which I think everybody is going to enjoy. But before we do that, I just wanted to touch on a few things that I've been doing. And we're getting very close to February. I think only a couple days from February. So I know it's still winter, but I can't help but start thinking about spring turkey season. And I do plan on bow hunting turkeys this spring. I'm still undecided if I'm gonna try to get my first one with the 12 gauge shotgun, and then go to the longbow for my second turkey because we can shoot 2 here in New York, or if I'm gonna just go at them with a bow like I did last year. I actually didn't get a turkey last year. Could have certainly got one if I was 12 gauge hunting, but I called 2 in real close on May 10th last year. The morning of May 10th, I called in 2 big toms from a long ways off, and of course I was bow hunting, and had them into 10-15 yards, and I just simply couldn't get the compound drawn on them without fear of getting busted with the way that whole scenario played out. And so I'm still on the fence if I'm gonna, I want to get at least one turkey this spring, so I might 12 gauge hunt until I get the first one, and then go after them with the longbow for the rest of the year, or I might just go at them with the longbow the whole year. So still undecided about that, but anyways, I am thinking about turkey season. And of course, like I mentioned in a previous, I did a video last week, a little tip video on some things that work for me in my shooting. And as a part of that tip video, I explained on there how I like to shoot my broadheads a lot. And of course, if I am going to be bow hunting turkeys this spring with my longbow, I need to start shooting my broadheads now. So I actually just recently ordered. I want to go with the Simmons Tiger Sharks, the 135 grain Simmons Tiger Sharks. Those are the broadheads that I want to go with. I ordered them in the 135 grain glue-on broadhead because I'm going to be shooting cedars. So I've got those coming. I'm hoping that those broadheads do what I want them to do. I've heard some great things about the Simmons broadheads so far from other guys on some forums and some other videos. So I'm going to give the Tiger Sharks from Simmons a go here. At least see how they work. So I've got that going on. And I just ordered another dozen of Gerbauden Archery cedar arrows. Tell you what, I love my cedar arrows. They're flying so awesome. I actually just ordered another dozen, and my plan there is the first dozen that I ordered, I had them ordered with the field tips glued on. So, I'm gonna just keep all those arrows as my field tip arrows, and I just ordered another dozen, which I ordered without any tips on them, and those are gonna be my broadhead arrows. So I got that going, and I just wanted to give you guys, I wanted to share one little quick tip before we jump into the interview with Jason. But I wanted to just share something, with you that I've been doing the last several weeks, and after a lot of, thinking about it and just knowing from my own shooting, I've actually made the decision that I'm just simply shooting my bow by feel as opposed to form. And I get, it's a little bit hard to explain, but basically what I'm going to be doing is, when I shoot my bow now, when I'm practicing with my longbow, is I am simply shooting the bow, 100% by what feels natural for me to do, for myself to do what feels natural. I'm just shooting my bow. I'm not worrying too much about how far I'm canting my bow, or if I'm shooting straight, or if I got a real heavy cant. I'm not really worried too much about, how I'm, really releasing the string. I'm just doing what feels natural for me. I'm just basically, once I glue onto my target, and I'm focusing on that exact point that I want to shoot and I want to hit, once I get to that stage, I'm forgetting about my bow form. I'm forgetting about how I'm gripping my bow. I'm just doing what feels natural for me to do. Because I just know for myself that, and I explained this in other podcasts and other videos so far, I'm not a target archer. I mean, I wouldn't mind, going to a 3D shoot here or there and having some fun with some guys, but I'm not really a target archer. I don't have, it's just not something that I do a lot of. I practice for hunting situations. So all of my practice is geared towards simply becoming a better bow hunter. And I just know for myself that, and I know this from past experiences that I've already had, but I just know for me that when the moment of truth comes, and that turkey or that deer or whatever animal I'm hunting that day, when the moment of truth comes and that deer or whatever, that animal gets into range, I just know for me, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I just kind of get maybe a little case of tunnel vision. I just lock on to the situation and the task at hand, and I just kind of get tunnel vision, and I kind of forget about, form and all that. It just kind of goes out the window at that point, because I'm so focused on having to make this shot in order to accomplish this goal in the moment in time, that I just know for me that once that moment of truth comes, I kind of lock up, get tunnel vision, and I'm just so focused on making the shot that I don't want to have to, worry at that point that, okay, I got to keep my fingers this way, or okay, I got to make sure I'm canting my bow at 45 degrees. I don't want to have to worry about that. I want to just see the animal, pick my spot, know when I want to make the shot, and then shoot the arrow. That's all I want to do, and I want it to be that simple for me. And that's one of the core reasons why I've made the decision to switch to traditional archery, because I'm sick of having to worry about all that form stuff and all that, crap, literally, that comes with shooting the compound bows. I'm over that stuff. I'm choosing the traditional bow because I want to just see the animal, see where I want to hit it, and just shoot the bow. And I want it to be that simple for me. So I just know that if I practice that way, when I'm practicing, if I just practice and just shoot the bow, then, my mind and my brain and my eyes and my muscle memory, all that's going to come with time and practice. And it's going to come with just shooting the bow, hundreds and thousands of times. And, that's just the core, element of my shooting, is that's what it's going to be about. I'm not going to be, And I don't want to argue with guys about, what form works best, or how you should grip your bow, or how you should hold your bow, or, how you should draw, cant your bow. I'm not going to get involved with all that. I'm just simply going to shoot my bow with what works for me and with what feels good for me, because I know that when I'm out there in the woods and that animal's coming in and the moment of truth arrives, nobody else is going to be in that position. Nobody else is going to be there to make the shot for me. I have to make that shot myself. And if I haven't practiced, the way it's going to happen when I hunt, then I think you're doing yourself a misfavor. So that's just a little tidbit I wanted to share with everybody. I'm just basically shooting my bow by feel now, and I'm going to get as good as I'm going to get. And I'm going to do it by what feels good, because I think it's the thing I have to do to become a better bow hunter, which is always my number one objective in my practice sessions. So without any further ado, I'm going to jump into the interview now I did with Jason Samkowiak of the Traditional Bow Hunting and Wilderness Podcast. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a very special guest on the line tonight. We are interviewing Jason Samkowiak of the Traditional Bow Hunting and Wilderness Podcast. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good. The reason why I wanted to have you on our podcast this evening is I know that you started a podcast yourself, which is called the Traditional Bow Hunting and Wilderness Podcast. And I just wanted to take this time this evening to learn a little bit more about you, how you got started in traditional archery, and a little bit more about your podcast. So without any further ado, Jason, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started in traditional archery?
Yep, sure can. Basically, I've been at it now, it's over 20 years, but when I never actually had any, a lot of people have parents and family and fathers and things like that to teach them hunting and get them into this stuff, and I never did. I grew up in northern Michigan, and then I moved downstate for right halfway through high school because of a girl I met down there, and I moved downstate, and so I kind of got away from being up north, never hunted anything, and then I wanted to, when I was 19 years old, wanted to get back into the hunting stuff, kind of like a bring me back up north deal, so I bought a Golden Eagle compound bow, and it was my first bow I ever had. I practiced with it, had some fun with it. I killed a deer with it the third day of the hunting season, and I was hooked. And then I immediately wanted meaner, faster, quicker bows, and at the time it was all overdraw systems, and I bought some Browning, I don't remember what bow it was, but I bought a bow, and it had all the bells and whistles, and I couldn't shoot it to save my life. I couldn't be accurate with it. It ended up having a split length that cracked in it, and all these things that went wrong, and then I got it fixed, and then I had another problem with it, and over that 4-month period with that bow, I thought, this is just a nightmare. This is a pain in the butt. This isn't fun. And so I was walking through Gander Mountain, and they had a left-handed, actually they had a right-handed one. They had a right-handed Martin Mamba recurve sitting there, and I played with it a little bit, and I thought, this is the way to go. I don't have to mess with all that stuff. Simple, sweet, easy. It'll make my hunting so much better. So I called Gander Mountain, and I ordered a left-handed one, and it came a couple weeks later, and I started shooting, and I was hooked. It was, and that's what I loved about it. Same thing with kind of like how you said in your podcast as well, too. You're a compound shooter, but you're looking to make your hunting better. You realize that the way you want to hunt with being on the ground, the situations you're going to end up putting yourself in, all these kind of things, a traditional bow lends itself to the ultimate hunting tool. Yet on the same note, you don't get the distance and some of the easiness that you get with a compound bow, but it is the ultimate hunting weapon for the situations, the speed of the shots, all these things that come into play, and that's what I wanted, and that's how I got started. And then once I bought that Martin Mamba, which I still have today, and I still use it every once in a while as a fishing bow sometimes, but just to keep it shooting. But that was my starting point, and that was how it all happened. And the first time I put an arrow on that string and let it go, I knew I would never ever own a compound ever again. That would be it. This was everything to me. And I also like the fact that with it, I'll never be good enough. I'll never shoot good enough. I'll never be accurate enough. I'll never be able to shoot as far. I'll never be able to shoot as many positions as I want. I will never, ever in my lifetime be as good as I can be with this bow, where with a compound bow, you can probably pretty much achieve that in about a month, or for the most part. Obviously you still get better, but you can kind of see my point that, after you're shooting a compound bow for a month, you can be putting them in bottle caps today at 80 yards. all day long without a problem with rangefinders and all this, and which is not a bad thing, and it's what the majority of people use, but it's not as challenging as traditional bows are.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Jason. I mean, like you touched on, your accuracy with the compound is just so much easier to achieve. I mean, I've only been shooting my traditional bows now for about 3 months, and, I'm nowhere near as accurate as I could have been, like I said, in the first hour with a new compound bow. And, I'm also really liking the challenge of it, and I'm looking forward to many years of shooting traditional bows. Now, I wanted to also dive into a little bit about how you started your podcast and what your goals are in the future with the Traditional Bow Hunting and Wilderness podcast.
Well, basically, the whole thing came about from an aspect. You get to a point with all this kind of stuff, with anything, and I think it's the reason that most people start a podcast, or you did YouTube videos on your stuff. You do something long enough, whatever that something is, and you basically, when you first get into something, you are a sponge. Just like you are right now with the traditional archery. You're a sponge. You absorb every single piece of knowledge you can find, every word you linger on. You pay attention to it. I mean, you're like a kid learning to speak for the first time. Every single thing, you absorb it and absorb it and absorb it. And then what happens is there gets to be a time in your life where that sponge is so full, still, a lot of room for much more. And I learn stuff every single day. And I learn stuff from a lot of different people, and I learn stuff from my kids that don't know anything about these things. So you're always learning from all different aspects. But when that sponge gets to a certain point, you realize, you know what, hey, I can wring that sponge out a little bit and pass some of that knowledge on. And that's our whole purpose in life. I mean, when you die, you're not taking nothing with you, but it's what you leave behind that counts. And, so you kind of, it's human nature to want to help other people. It's human nature to want to help them succeed and try and, pass on what you have and what knowledge you gain and make things easier for other people. And so, that was the whole thing with the podcast. And the reason I named it the Traditional Bow Hunting and Wilderness Podcast instead of just a traditional bow hunting podcast is that there's so many other things that we get into as well, too, that are not quite traditional bow hunting related, yet we all enjoy, or if you don't enjoy, that I want to bring to attention that people can enjoy, and there are ways to be outdoors and do stuff. So I named it that way, but, you sit there and you think about how much fun there is, especially in the traditional archery world, traditional bow hunting world. There is a whole romance to all of this stuff that you'll start getting into that'll just grab hold of you, and it's learning to make your own bowstrings, learning to make all your own arrows, customizing things that you want. It's endless stuff. All the literature, all the books you're going to read, all of the the heroes in the traditional world are actually real heroes. They're not just in the traditional world, but that was the only bows that were available to them back then. But you take all these guys that actually helped found bow hunting, that helped bring it to the forefront, that allowed states to have bow hunting seasons, and you read all these things and their adventures and all this stuff. It's amazing. It grabs you and pulls you in, and there's so much of that stuff that you can share and give back to the world. And all these little aspects of traditional archery, is what I know. Same with the compound guys. I mean, I'm sure there's a million different ways to tune an arrow rest and 25 different arrow rests that can be played with, and how to do this and that. And, there's things that I'll never understand because I haven't been in that world for over 20-something years, and even when I was barely in it. So compounds I don't know anything about, but just like the guys that do that, or the gun guys, everybody's got something they're very passionate about. Mine happens to be the traditional archery and all things kind of outdoor related, and you gain some knowledge in it. You figure, this is time to pass some of that on and maybe help people out a little bit.
Well, Jason, I can certainly speak that I found your podcast about 3 months ago when I first got into shooting a traditional bow, and I find your podcast to be very informative, and you've already helped me out in various aspects of my own shooting. And you've got literally dozens of podcasts that you've already done on pretty much every topic that I can think of with traditional archery. But there's three topics in particular that I wanted to dive into a little bit more detail here tonight. And the first topic I wanted to discuss is you did a podcast a while back about why form isn't a relevant element of traditional archery, and I was just hoping you could further explain that to people listening tonight.
Yep, sure can. And I use it. I get picked on a lot for that because I always say that form has no place in traditional archery. Form is only for taxidermy mounts. And the reason for that is that it's taken kind of loosely. But the reason that I got into traditional archery, and from what I hear in your podcast, the reason that you got into traditional archery is because you don't want to have to deal with all of the crap that's involved with shooting a compound bow, or has to follow rules of form, to have to follow all of these things. You want to see your animal, stare at your animal, never look at your bow, never look at your arrow, but be able to pull an arrow out of your quiver, put it on the string, pull that thing back, put it right where it needs to go, and not think a second twice about it. It doesn't matter if your bow's canted at 90 degrees, 45 degrees, straight up and down, if you're twisted behind you, if you're sitting on your knees and you got your bow, you're hunkered down so your bow's only 2 inches horizontal off the ground. You don't want to have to care about any of that. All you want to care about is that sweet spot right behind that shoulder where that arrow's going, and that's all you care about. In traditional archery, traditional bow hunting is designed specifically for that. That's the reason that we both got into this, was to become better hunters in that aspect, and to challenge ourselves more with it, and also to take a simple road. It's a stick and a string, and there's no reason to overcomplicate it. And also being at it for all these years, not that they're a ton, but 22 years of being in traditional bow hunting, I've seen a lot of people at 3D shoots. I have a lot of friends. If I take 10 people that I shoot with, they're traditional bow hunters, and we lined every one of them up, not one of them shoots in the same way. Everybody's different. We got people that shoot 3 under. We got people that shoot split finger. We got people that shoot 3 under and anchor still with the arrow nock right underneath their eyeball. We got people that cant their bow 45 degrees. We got people that shoot straight up and down. We have people that hunker over and bend their knees and dive into the shot and shorten up their draw length so they feel they're focused more, to people that shoot with their shoulders at 90 degrees, and then people that shoot with their shoulders real open at 40 degrees. So there is no set way of doing this, and every one of them are good shots. So in my opinion, the actual form that we learned in the compound days, have your feet, and I don't remember what the form is, but your shoulders at 90 degrees, your feet at 45 degrees, your front toe a little forward, whatever this stuff is that everybody's taught. Make sure you have your bow arm at this point, make sure your elbow's set this way. In my opinion, none of that stuff matters in the traditional bow hunting world. It may in a traditional archery if you're target archery, but in the bow hunting world, the only things that matter, in my opinion, is that you have your bow arm solid, you have good follow through on it, and you anchor in the same place each time, and you have a pretty decent release. If you have those, everything else will come into play. None of it matters. It doesn't matter where you anchor. And I actually know people that anchor in weird positions. And Steve Teray, actually from Northern Miss Longbows, he was just telling me a story about how when he hurt his shoulder real bad, he was out hunting, and he started shooting from the hip. With a 100-pound longbow, shooting it from the hip because he couldn't get his arm up high enough to shoot from up there, decided to go out hunting and kill. He practiced with it a little bit and seen he could do good at a pretty close distance. And he killed a doe at 10 yards shooting from the hips, kneeling down next to a pine tree up there in the UP. So there is no set method. So I don't really like it when people get out there and start saying, hey, you have to hold your body this way, you have to shoot this way, you have to do this or that, because it kind of takes away from the true essence of what traditional bow hunting is. And that is the fact that it is a stick and a string. You put an arrow on that string, and you pull it back, and your mind tells you where to hold or where to look to let that arrow go so it hits there. And you know what? By golly, most of the time it actually hits there. So, overanalyzing it and looking at it too hard and diving in too much just gets overwhelming, and it screws you up. And, it's not supposed to be that way. It's not supposed to be mechanical. It's supposed to be fluid and emotional and psychological, and that's what it all relates to. The only accuracy, or all of our accuracy in traditional bow hunting, in my opinion, for an instinctive shooter, comes from your mind seeing the arc of that arrow. You shoot the shot, and your mind sees that, your eyes see it and tell your mind what it sees in that arc and how far it goes and how high up it went, and your mind does all these calculations, and you do that over and over again through repetition. And you know what? Next time when you get into a situation, that computer in your head goes, hey, we'll just do this way, and you'll put that right there, and you just follow along with it. The rest is just muscle memory, and your mind does all the work for you. So it doesn't have to be, a specific form, which you especially will find this out now that you're getting into this stuff. You haven't hunted yet with that bow. I believe you said you were waiting until next year, right?
That's correct. Yeah, I'm going to wait until this coming turkey season. Actually, will be my first time hunting with the traditional bow.
Okay. Well, let's put it into a scenario here that's kind of interesting, and let's just look at it from a different advantage point. But say you're in a, you're in a tree stand, and you'd be in a tree stand with your compound, and deer comes in that, and he's on your off side where you can't shoot. He's like directly right. He's right off behind your tree. Okay. He's walking behind you, and he's coming in behind the tree that you're in, and he's just breaking out on your off shooting side, so the side that you don't shoot. Now, imagine how hard that would be to turn and make that shot with a compound and be able to swing that around. Where with your traditional bow, you'll literally be able to just bend your knees down, so you kind of crouch down, you'll roll up on the balls of your feet, you'll swing your body right around, and you'll wrap that upper limb will swing right around behind the tree that you're in, and you'll be able to make that shot. Again, that's all out of form. Or same thing if you're, you think about when you're, all the guys that, when we're caribou hunting, elk hunting, javelina hunting, pig hunting, all the things that we do that are spot and stalk type huntings, and you end up getting in there close, and then you're sneaking in, and you got a blow down in front of you, and you're wiggling in between branches, and you got to get real low to the ground to make a shot, or you're sitting there and you're on the ground and you're just hunkered under a pine tree, sitting on a little stool, and an animal comes in behind you. You can literally roll right out and just get right in and shoot them. The advantage of not having form allows you to shoot in all kinds of weird, twisted, and crazy positions in all different angles of the bow, and be able to pull these shots off completely. One of the best ones too is you're in the grass and you're sneaking into something and you're covering that last bit of open ground. Think like muleys out west or antelope or something like that, and you're basically on your belly crawling into there. When you go to make a shot with a compound, you actually have to come up on your knees and you have to get that bow vertical, straight up and down, and so your head and your upper body can be 4 feet, 3 feet in the air above that grass to take that shot. Where with a traditional bow, all you have to do is keep that bow parallel to the ground, and you just got to lift it up enough to get above the blades of grass, and then you can draw that back from a twisted sideways, completely horizontal, almost right on your belly, with just flexing your belly muscles to get the front end of you up high enough, and you can actually make that shot perfectly if you practice it. So, like I said, it just goes to show you that the form is not as important as people seem to make it. And if you're standing on a line shooting at a target bale at 20 yards, it's going to make a difference between X rings and not X rings. But in the bow hunting world, where it's a matter of a kill shot or not a kill shot, it's so insignificant as far as shooting. You really limit yourself by sticking with one specific form of shooting. You get the most advantage by learning how to do everything and just letting it all be natural.
Yeah, I think what you just talked about there, Jason, pretty much sums up the exact reason why I've made the decision to switch to traditional archery, because like you said, I mean, I'm going to be hunting mostly off the ground from here on out, and I just don't want to be tied down to having any specific form that I have to follow in order to make these shots and to be successful with that bow. And that's kind of the point that I want the listeners tonight to kind of take with them, is just the fact that don't let people get you into thinking that you have to follow one specific methodology when it comes to shooting that traditional bow. That it's pretty much open to what's comfortable for you and what gets the job done for you specifically.
Yep, very, very well said. That's what it's all about. And you did hit on it pretty good too, because you came right out in your episode there when you're talking about getting into traditional archery and or traditional bow hunting and using the recurve. I sat there listening to that, and I was just smiling the whole time, because the whole reason that you're getting into it is for the whole advantage that you get out of it. It's the same, they're 6 of one, half dozen of the other. The reasons what you want to do, there's no bow that's going to lend itself better to the kind of hunting you want to do than a traditional bow. It will limit you in your distances, but the limit distance will only make you that much better of a hunter.
Exactly. And well, I guess like one of my buddies told me recently, I have finally seen the light. So but now the second topic that I wanted to have you discuss with us this evening is, I listened to another one of your podcasts that you put up a while back, where you talked about the reasons why a traditional bow hunter wants to own 2 of the identical bows. And I just wanted you to talk a little bit about that tonight. And so our listeners out there listening, what, in your opinions, what are the reasons a bow hunter is going to want to own 2 identical traditional bows?
And it's a great question. It's one that I actually get quite often. Like when I posted that podcast, which was quite a while ago. I think that was about a year ago that I put that on there. It was called Owning Multiple Bows or something. Let's think about the guy that goes on a moose hunt in Alaska. He just spent $20,000 and he's going up there and he's a compound shooter. Do you think he's bringing one bow? No, he's going to bring two bows. Guess what? Both of those bows are going to be set up identical. And there's no difference in a traditional world. And for somebody who thinks that a traditional bow will not break or will not blow up or that nothing can go wrong with it is fooling themselves because, when you're at this for long enough, there's good odds that you're going to have something go wrong with a bow, whether it's self-inflicted or a manufacturer issue or whatever it is. You got to remember, most of these bows are made out of wood, and wood is a living thing. It was a living thing when it was done, and every one of them have their own characteristics and inherent weaknesses and sometimes flaws that even the best bowyer in the world can't know or won't realize. And can't find out about it. And so bows blow off sometimes. A limb will bust out. Something will happen. It'll delaminate because maybe a glue or the glue was wrong, and maybe not wrong from the bowyer. Maybe the mixture he got from the place he got it from was wrong. There's so many variables that come into play that can make a traditional bow blow up. I've only had one bow blow up ever in my life on me, but it did. It came apart, and it came apart literally 3 weeks before I was going on a caribou hunt. Luckily, I had another bow that was exactly the same, and I had another bow that was so similar that I was okay. But we were over my buddy John, who was going with me. We were in his house, and we had a big cardboard cutout we made from wash machine boxes and painted them like caribou, and we were out there, we're shooting like crazy and having the time of our life, and I pulled back on that bow, and sure enough, that recurve and that upper limb just folded right out and done. And I had that bow for a couple of years, and the bowyer, a very reputable, top-notch guy, even after having it for years and way out of warranty, when I told him what happened and sent him pictures, sure enough, he made me brand new limbs automatically, never charged me a thing. I sent him to Riser, and he sent me back a perfectly good bow again, and, so they're good on that, but things can happen. Anything can happen. So, my opinion is any bow hunter that's going to be out there bow hunting, you need to have two bows. Compound guys or recurve guys, doesn't matter what it is. When you're dropping serious money on hunting trips and, or time, even vacation time is incredibly valuable. And if you're, you got 1 week a year vacation and you're going to spend it in a different state bow hunting, and you get out there and on the first day, you go to close the car door, you slam the door on the tip of that longbow and that thing's done now. Not only did you break a bow, but your whole entire week, that entire year, all that vacation time is gone. So having more than one bow is important, but having, as traditional bow hunters, where we don't have the adjustable weights, or, we can't adjust the weight of our bows, we can't adjust bow or arrow rests and sight pins and all these things. I think it's important to have two bows that are very similar, if not almost identical, in everything they do for a couple of reasons. Number one reason is so that you can shoot the same arrows. It's nice to not have to carry arrows for two separate bows. And with traditional bows today, if your bows are within 5 pounds of each other, they're pretty much going to shoot the same arrows. It's good enough that it isn't a big deal. Some of those can even stretch 7-8 pounds. So you're fine with it, but the key thing is to make it where you can shoot the same kind of arrows out of both bows. And then the other thing I think is important is that by shooting the same kind of arrows, or even if they're two different bows, the same relative weightness of arrows to that bow, grains per pound, is that your mind, again, as I said earlier, your mind relates to accuracy and it learns based on the arc of that arrow. So all of your sight pins are stored away inside of your head based on the arc of that arrow and how your mind sees it at different distances. If you're out there and you're longbow hunter, and so you've been shooting all year long, and then you break that bow and you grab a recurve that's 5 pounds heavier and you still shoot the same arrows out of there, and you take this and shoot it, your sight pins in your mind are all out of whack. Everything is off now in your head, and it becomes a lot harder to put that together. It can be done, and people do it all the time, and there's definitely nothing wrong with having bows that are different. But with me hunting a lot of different places every year and not always close to home, and spending valuable hunting or vacation time to do this, and all these variables come into play, I would rather have two bows that are 100% identical so that if something does happen to one of my bows, I can grab the other one and I don't skip a beat. Everything about it, even the feel in my hand on that grip, everything is 100% identical. And I just go, oh, well, broke that bow. I'll talk to the bowyer when I get back, see if I can't get a new one. But right now, I'm game on. Here I go. I don't skip a beat. So that's the major advantage to it, especially with the prices of them today. I mean, there's a lot of bows out there. Compounds, I remember compound prices used to be a heck of a lot cheaper. I haven't bought a compound other than kid bows, for my kids in a lot of years. But I look through the magazines and I see some of these bows at $1,000 and $1,500 and $800, and that's a lot of money. I mean, there's traditional bows have gone up some too, but they're not any. Traditional bows haven't went up at the rate that compound bows do, and you can buy a lot of great bows. Let's even say that you bought $1,000 Black Widow recurve that you absolutely love. And you have this bow and you want to buy another one like it. There's a lot of bows that you can find used ones for probably $450, $300, things like that. You can find used, same exact kind of bow that you have, so that you have a backup bow. Same with longbows. You buy even if you only bought a $500 longbow, you can usually find a used one that's very similar to what you have for another $250 somewhere, and then you got an identical match. So point being, it doesn't cost a lot of money to get another bow that's very much like the one you have. And if you bought one, if you bought your second one, your identical one used, you'll never lose money on it, because you could use it, and then say you're shooting a 50-pound bows and you got two identical 50-pound bows, and then you jump up in weight and now you're shooting 60-pounders, and you don't want to keep those 50-pounders, the used one that you sell, you'll be able to sell it for the exact same price you paid for it, if not more. And your new one that you bought, you really won't lose a whole heck of a lot of money on. So it's not like there's a major loss in there kind of thing. But having two of them the same, in my opinion, it's just a major asset. Not a requirement, but it's a definite value to make sure that you're not wasting hunting time.
Yeah, I agree. I can clearly see where having two identical bows, especially as a traditional archer, is certainly going to be a major advantage, because when you think about it, you're spending countless hours practicing with that bow, and like we talked about before, when you're shooting traditional, everything is muscle memory and just how you feel with that bow. And nobody wants to be out on an out-of-state hunting trip or even hunting around home on vacation time and having something go wrong with their bow, and then having to miss basically the best time of year to hunt because you didn't have a backup bow handy. So I think that's a great point there. And now, Jason, the last topic that I wanted to have you discuss with us tonight is, and it's certainly helped me in my own shooting. You did a podcast a while back about the importance of having a strong bow arm for traditional bow hunting. And I wanted you to discuss that a little bit.
Well, you hear and read a lot of things about release. Release is everywhere. Release. Your anchor point, your bow grip, high grip, low grip, medium grip, custom grip. You hear all these things. Elbow, keep your elbow in line. Use back tension. All of these things are great, and there's nothing wrong with it. But I think one of the most overlooked things is the bow arm. The bow arm, in my opinion, is the most important aspect of your shot. And the reason I say that, let's look at it, for example, if we're talking about release. If you shoot with a dead release and try and keep that release right close to your face, and then all of a sudden you get kind of caught up in the heat of the moment, you end up plucking that string or throwing your hand back or even kicking it off to the side a little bit on release, the difference in your arrow, where your arrow impacts, is not tremendous at hunting distances, because your feathers compensate for that and bring it back. They make your shot more forgiving, because the feathers can accommodate and correct whatever little mistakes like that you're making. Same with your bow grip. If you grip with a high grip, you grip with a low grip, medium grip, and then you grab the bow wrong, even if you torque your bow, and on a bow you twist it a little bit and bounce that arrow off that shelf just a touch because you torqued it too much, the feathers will pull that arrow back and compensate for that and give you a little more forgiveness in that, and put your arrow where it needs to go. If your elbow's a little bit high, you start creeping down, you short draw a touch, you're going to shoot a little bit lower, but not too horrible. You're still going to be in the right zone. All these things, if you don't use back tension and it's more forearm, you're just going to end up plucking your release some more, because your fingers are going to be a little tight. It's going to get a little noisier, and you may kick that arrow a touch, but the feathers will compensate for it. But when it comes to a bow arm, if your bow arm is not pointed at that target exactly where it needs to be and rock solid when that shot goes off, then that shot is gone. Who knows where it's going to be? It doesn't matter. If you dump in that bow arm, you're pulling that bow arm, you're dropping your bow arm, you're jerking the bow arm out of the way. If you're not following through and moving the bow arm too quick before that arrow gets off that string, whatever happens, if your bow arm is not 100% solid at the time that arrow goes off, then that is the biggest factor. Your arrow can't correct for that. Your feathers cannot compensate for you pointing the arrow in a different direction. And that's what's basically happening if your bow arm is not completely solid and where it needs to be. Then you are, when the shot goes off, wherever you put that bow arm at is the direction that arrow is pointing, and it is not where you want it to be. So, you can't emphasize that enough. Of all the things that you can and can't get away with, in all these positions of shooting that we were just talking about, these weird contortions and things that we do with our body and, that we're allowed to do as traditional bow hunters, the one thing that can never, ever be changed or be wrong is going to be that bow arm. Even Fred Bear, you read those articles about him on that stone sheep hunt where, that sheep was over the ridge, just over top. He was on the other side of this ridge, over a ridge with a blade of that ridge sticking up between him and that ram, and it's covering the vitals. So he couldn't see the vitals. 25-yard shot, I think it was, and he knew where the vitals were, but he couldn't see them. And so he short drew that bow and shot, and he just let that arc so he shot it less power than he normally would to get that arc to fall in over top of that ridge, and he ended up killing that ram. And that works because your mind understands, just like we said, with the arc, it can calculate those distances, it does the math, it understands all this stuff, it puts it together for you. But even in that situation, if that bow arm wasn't solid, he would not be pointing where he needed it to be. So that rock-solid bow arm, that's everything, man, in my opinion. I mean, everything else you can get away with cheating a little bit, or bad form, or a failure on something, or, whatever the case is, even a little target panic. You can get away with anything you want on any other part of your shooting. But if your bow arm is not rock solid and not stable, then everything else is lost. Your accuracy is 100% gone.
Yeah, I actually listened to your podcast on that twice, Jason, because I've noticed in my own shooting that seems to be the one aspect of my shot there, that if I really focus on keeping that bow arm rock solid, it seems like even if I don't have the best release or something else goes astray, that as long as I'm focusing on keeping that bow arm on target through the shot, more often than not, I'm finding my shots to be maybe not the most perfect shot, but a good enough shot to have gotten the job done on that animal that I would have been hunting. So I thought that was a very important thing to cover, and I'm hoping that some guys. Yep, go ahead, Jason.
Not to cut you off, but one more thing on that. Everybody talks about how great of a shot Howard Hill was, and the Whalen brothers, or I can't remember how you say their names. It's not off the top of my head, but some of the best archers in the world, John Schultz, these guys. Everybody talked about how they shot in a very fluid motion. It was all at one time. As soon as the anchor hit the corner of their mouth, the arrow was gone instantly. And a lot of people shoot that way still. Even Steve Gray up there, Northern Miss Longbows, he shoots the same exact way, very Howard Hill, very John Schultz style of shooting. And he's deadly accurate. His groups are incredible. I mean, all of these great archers all shot this way, and people think that a lot of people say, it's because it was snap shooting. His mind picked it, it's this and that. And that may be true, but in my own opinion, which obviously I'll never, be able to verify that, but the one thing I think that all of those shooting styles, including Fred Bear with his push-pull method, he would push the bow out, pull the arrow back, and as soon as it got back, release, basically. That same kind of methods. All of these great shooters have one thing in common, and that is at the time they release the arrow, they are still pushing their bow arm into the target. And if you're always pushing your bow arm at the target, you can't let it get off target. It's like when you shoot like I do with a static style shooting, where you come back to an anchor point, rest in for a couple of seconds, get yourself lined up like you want, you take the shot. That's where that dead zone where you're actually at full draw is where it gets really tricky to maintain that force, that forward force and push, that opposite reaction, kind of push-pull method that you get with your bow hand and your draw hand. And so I have to, that's my number one thing. I have to consciously tell myself all the time, keep pushing that bow arm, keep pushing that bow arm. When I release, I don't actually release with my hand. I release by pushing pushing so hard on my bow arm that it kind of pulls it out of my hand. That's kind of how I do it. But, that's the key. If you get static with that arm, with your bow arm, if you don't constantly push forward on that bow arm and you get it in a static position, that's where all those problems really start to set in.
Yeah, I agree. I think having a strong bow arm is certainly a very critical factor, and I think a lot of guys out there would agree with us. Now, before I let you go, Jason, I got one question for you. I actually posted a question earlier today on a traditional bow hunters Facebook group that I'm a member to, and I just let the guys there know that I was going to be interviewing you tonight for the podcast, and I asked anybody if they had any questions for you, and I had a response from Nicholas Richardson that I thought was a good question, so I wanted to ask you. What Nicholas wanted to ask you is, he wanted you to just talk a little bit about ultra high forward of center arrows in how important that can be to your shooting also.
Oh, that's a real good one. Well, keep in mind that I've always been a huge proponent of heavy arrows. I mean, always. I started out with aluminums back in the early days, and then I went into cedars, and I shot cedars for a long time, and I always tried to find the heaviest cedars. I've always been a huge fan of heavy arrows. I can't find one instance where a light arrow has any benefit whatsoever. And when I say heavy, even now I dropped down from 63 pounds down to 57 pounds, and I'm still shooting a 700 grain arrow, and I have no intentions of going lower. I'm actually thinking about going up a little more to about 725, 750. But I like heavy arrows because they make your bow quieter. I think they're more forgiving in flight of any errors that you have because the arrow's moving slower. I think they hit harder, penetrate better. I'm a big fan of heavy arrows on all avenues. They don't take deflections as well. They handle deflections better, I should say. They handle wind better. Just everything about a heavy arrow, in my opinion, is better. Well, the EFOC stuff I'm actually relatively new to. Now, I always shot pretty high, like what you would consider high EFOC, just because I was trying to get the weight of my arrows up. So I always shot somewhere in the low to mid 20% range, which is considered high, and I've always had good results with it, not knowing that I was actually shooting anything that was called high EFOC. That's what I needed to do to get my arrow weight. But this year, actually last year, so about this time last year, I started experimenting with some ultra high EFOC arrows in the 30% range. And in order to do that, I had to custom kind of make my own because I shoot a short arrow. I'm only got a 26-inch draw, so I'm shooting 27-inch arrows. But I built up my own arrows kind of custom. I won't get into all the details of them because of the amount of time it would take to explain how I made them. But you can make arrows that are 30%. There's a lot of components out there to do it, stuff like that. But with a 30% arrow, I have found that the penetration is way more. Even in testing, I killed 6 deer, 7 deer this year with them, and every one of them was phenomenal. But even in my testing, when I was first testing it, I would give you an example. I would shoot with on my block target when I was bare shaft testing, and I would be testing these arrows versus my old, 23% arrows with broadheads on there, and I'd shoot them into these block targets, so they're both fletched arrows. Well, one thing I noticed is that ones that were 30% EFOC were blowing through my block target and sticking into the board that I had behind my block target. It was, further back. It was about probably a foot distance between that board and that block target, but they were zipping through the block target and hitting that board all the time, where my 23% arrows were not actually going through that target, and regardless of where they were hitting. So it showed it there, and then so then I was doing some testing in the windy stuff, which you can see a video I did. It's on my YouTube and my podcast site, but I took them out on a 30-mile-an-hour windy day, and I was shooting these EFOC arrows, and the flight was amazing. I'd never seen nothing like it. Basically, think of a dart. A dart's got a real heavy front end, and then it's got just an ultralight back end. It's basically another way to look at it, too, that Dave Landis, he's a great friend and somebody I talk to a lot. I've never met the guy, but I talk to him a lot through email and stuff like that, too. He actually gave me a perfect example. He said that EFOC arrows are basically like taking a rock and tying a string on it and throwing the rock. The rock is basically the point, and the string is the shaft. It just kind of follows along behind it. The string follows the rock. It's irrelevant kind of thing. High EFOC arrows take that same approach. The only thing that matters is the point of that arrow. Everything else is just there to just tag along for the most part. And to give you something interesting, I haven't published it yet, but I actually have it. I live out in the woods, to kind of get off subject, and I don't have high speed internet out there. I got cell phone internet even in my house, so I'm kind of limited on my data. So when I make some of these videos, I wait till I get downstate to my place down there where I have cable to upload them. So tonight, sometime late tonight, I'll actually be uploading this video that I did. I shot it on Monday, but I actually took and did something that we're never allowed to do. And like I said, I haven't even published this video yet, but I took a bare shaft because I'm setting arrows up for my for this 57-pound Northern Mist. I'm finally, fine-tuning these. But I took a bare shaft arrow, set up like I want, 30% EFOC, and I put the widest, biggest broadhead I got, which is a 1.5-inch wide Magnus 2-blade broadhead, and 440 grains up front, 30% FOC, 700 grain arrow, and I was shooting this outside, bare shaft, no feathers on it whatsoever, and that big broadhead, and I shot it 3 times, and I made 3 perfect shots. And I'm still dealing with a knock high a little bit. I haven't kind of worked the kinks out of in my bare shaft tuning. I just shot so many arrows, I was pretty exhausted. But even with that little bit of knock high flight that I'm still getting, I made 3 perfect 22-yard shots. With a broadhead, with that big, huge broadhead on a bare shaft outside. You could never have done that with any normal FOC arrow, because with a normal weight arrow, the shaft has all that major influence. The feathers have a major influence. It doesn't have that dart effect. You take a dart and you cut the vanes off of a dart and you can still throw it and the head still carries it to the dartboard. Same principle applies with heavy EFOC arrows. But for all practical purposes, I just found out that if my arrows are tuned like I want them to, I could basically hunt with the biggest broadhead I own and not even have to have feathers on my arrows. Pretty interesting. And I relate it all to that EFOC. So the benefits are that it just gives you amazing arrow flight in wet conditions with wet feathers, in windy conditions with windy weather. They penetrate better, they fly better, and they're just amazing advantages, kind of thing. I've never would have ever dreamed it, but the last year has proved it to me. So many different occasions and times that, heck, one doe that I shot a 4-point here in Michigan this year, quartered away on about a 45-degree angle, and ended up taking a shot and about 12 yards away, shot right. It was about 4th, 5th rib back from right behind his shoulder, and it angled up, and that that broadhead came to a stop in the opposite shoulder blade. But it went through that shoulder blade enough that the tip, you could feel it sticking out of the other side of the shoulder blade, and I couldn't get that broadhead out. I actually had to wait till I processed that deer, and I had to use a bandsaw to actually cut that bone to try and get that head out of there, because there was just no way I could get that head out of that shoulder blade. Just like I said, it's pretty impressive, the penetration that you get out of there. And with these big, wide broadheads, I've hit a couple of deer in shoulder blades with these, and you know what? They never go through the shoulder blade because they're just a 1.5-inch wide broadhead. Along my longbow, even 63 pounds in my short drawing, I can't push it through a shoulder blade. And so when I've hit a couple animals in a shoulder blade before, and you know what? You'll see that animal kicks that arrow off. You'll see him on your trail camera 3 days later, and he's all fine. But like I said, with this is the only one I actually, you could say, hit in a shoulder blade. Was this one, and it went through, it broke a rib going in, angled through, 3/4 of that body on that angle, and then ended up sticking in that shoulder blade from the inside, and, was more than halfway through that shoulder blade. I consider that pretty impressive penetration, considering the bow I'm using,
Yeah, I mean, I never, really gave, the high forward to center arrows a whole lot of thought until I heard your podcast on it, but it certainly makes a lot of sense, especially when you think of it in the, in those practical scenarios that you mentioned, like, tying a string onto a rock and throwing it. I mean, you can just kind of visualize, that rock leading the way and that string, in the background, kind of going right where that rock's going. So it certainly makes a lot of sense, and it's something I want to experiment more with here in the future as well. One other thing that Richard wanted to know, or that Nicholas wanted to know, Jason, is he wanted to know what rope you use to stuff your arrows with. I know you talked a lot about that on your podcast, stuffing your arrows with rope. He's looking to see exactly what rope you're using for that.
Good question. And actually, for the record, I don't stuff them anymore now. I was stuffing them when I wanted, before the EFOC stuff, when I was just looking for heavyweight arrows, that's when I stuffed them with rope. Now I'm actually, if you look at my podcast site on there, under the articles, I got an article that gives you full detail on how I'm making my arrows now. But now with high EFOC arrows, I don't want the weight in the whole shaft. I want the weight all up front. All in the head. So I'm actually taking, you know what these brass inserts are, those 100-grain brass inserts that you can get for carbon arrows. Well, I'm taking 2 of them. One of them, I'm grinding the lip off of it that keeps it from going into your shaft. I grind that lip off. I turn it backwards, and I use a nail, and I pound a nail between the 2 inserts and glue them together. The nail keeps them together, and I'm using basically a 200-grain insert that goes into all the way into my shaft about 3 inches. So the system I'm using now is different. But when I was using rope for aluminum arrows, like when I used to shoot 21-17 arrows out of my recurves, I was stuffing them full of quarter-inch nylon poly rope is what I was using, and it gave me about an extra 100 grains to the total weight of my shaft. And what's nice about using rope is it really didn't affect the spine too much. Now, a little bit, but not a lot. So it wasn't like you had to make a major spine change. Maybe a 25-grain head change might be in order, or maybe cutting a quarter-inch off the shaft, or, whatever the case was. But it was very minimal spine adjustments, if any, that was needed. In some of my bows, I didn't need to make any changes. With carbons, for one, were real forgiving with that. But with the carbon arrows, I think I was using, I want to say it was I think it was 3/16 nylon rope. I think it was either 8 or 3/6. I think it's 3/16 for my gold tip. My 35-55 gold tip shafts that I use. Remember, I shoot real short arrows, so mine are, I use the lighter weight shafts or lighter spine shafts to get my weight right. But for those, I was using, I think it was 3/16 nylon rope. And the key with using the rope is you put your insert in and glue your insert in. Then you take the rope and you cut it about 4 or 5 inches longer than what the shaft length is. You stuff it in there and drop it in, and then you take a board, set a board kind of on your carpet floor in your living room is how I did it. And I just take that shaft and I start smashing that insert down on that board. And what it does is it compacts that rope in there and packs it in there good and tight. Because it will compress a little bit. About 4 inches or so of that rope will compress down into that shaft. So you do that, you pound it in there. Once you pound it in there, put your knock on it, and, even if you don't have feathers on it or not, take it outside, shoot it into your bag target or block target 4 or 5 times, and it will finish compressing that, and you just cut yourself another inch-long piece or whatever of rope, put it in there to fill that gap, and now it's set. It won't compress anymore, and what it does is it adds about 100 grains of weight to your arrow. So if you're shooting a 500-grain arrow and you wanted to shoot a 600-grain arrow, then you could do this, and it basically does not really affect the spine that much so you can basically get away with doing it. So if you're somebody who wants to change weight of arrows based on your animals, if you're whitetail or antelope hunting and you want to have a little more distance and trajectory of your arrow, and say you shoot a 550-grain arrow, but then you're going on a bear hunt and you want to turn that into a 650-grain arrow for closer range shots and better penetration, then you can just add this rope to that arrow, and now you've basically made yourself the same exact arrow, but you got another 100 grains of energy.
Very nice. I appreciate you clearing that up for us. Well, Jason, we're coming up on time, and before I let you go, I wanted you to, for all the listeners out there this evening and for the guys watching the show, where can people go to learn more about your podcast?
Website is tbwpodcast.com. It stands for Traditional Bow Hunting Wilderness Podcast is what it stands for. It's tbwpodcast.com. And I put everything on there, even the YouTube videos, any of the videos I do when I put them on YouTube, like we were just talking about that one where I shot that bear-shafted broadhead. I'll sometime late tonight, real late tonight, when I get back from all my stuff, I'll end up putting that on there. It'll be on YouTube, but anything I put on YouTube, I also put on that podcast site. So you can find them both, but the podcast site has all the podcasts. It's got all the YouTube videos, and it also has all the articles. Anything I do is on there. I basically do a new podcast every Monday. I put a new podcast on there. I think we're at about 102 of them on there right now. So I put a podcast on there every Monday. The videos and the articles are just basically whenever I'm in a mood to do something. I got a couple more coming up on knife sharpening and stropping and a few things that I've done that I just haven't got around to editing and publishing yet. So it's just kind of whenever I'm in a mood to throw something on there, video article wise, I do. But podcasts are like clockwork every Monday.
Very nice. I know I'll be looking forward to seeing your updates, Jason. I highly recommend all listeners to go over and check out your website. I find it very informative, and I'm sure all the listeners here will also. Well, Jason, I want to thank you again for being on the show, and we'll have to do it again sometime.
For sure, and I really like what you're doing. I like, like I said, not enough people. There's not enough people in the world trying to pass on the information that they have, and we all need to do that. And I really like what you're doing with this, and I'll be following along everything you're doing. And I thank you for doing it. Like I said, it's getting that information out there to people is what it's all about. And I appreciate you. I know how hard it is, and I know how much work goes into it, and I know what it takes for you to pull this off. And my hat's off to you for taking your time to do it.
Well, thanks, Jason. Yeah, it is a lot of work, but, like I know I can kind of reflect your sentiments here. If we can just help one person, then it's been all worth it. So
I agree completely. It was an absolute pleasure talking with you, and I hope to do it again real soon.
Yes, you too, Jason. Take care.
Okay, we'll talk to you later. Thanks.
All right, guys. Well, there you have it. That was my recent interview I did with Jason Samkowiak. As you could tell in the interview, Jason is a very passionate guy. He's very passionate about traditional archery, and he enjoys helping others. And he has some great podcasts on his website. I would recommend everybody to go to his website if you haven't already. Check out his podcasts. Check out all his past shows and videos. I think you're going to enjoy what he has to share with you. I'm going to leave some links in the narrative of this video. Down in the video description, I'm leaving a link to Jason's website, the Traditional Bow Hunting and Wilderness Podcast. So go on over there, check out Jason's podcast. He does a great job and shares some great information that I think all traditional archers could learn and benefit from. As always, I want to thank everybody who tuned into this week's show. I will see you next weekend right here on a new episode of the Tradcast.